Welcome to Terry's Kitchen, where we talk food, faith, and family. Today we are going to be making Texas hash, but before we get started, I'm going to read out of Jesus Calling, which was our devotion for today. Bring me your mind for rest and renewal. Let me infuse my presence into your thoughts. As your mind stops racing, your body relaxes, and you regain awareness of me. This awareness is vital to your spiritual well-being. It is your lifeline, spiritually speaking. There are actually more than 4 dimensions in this world where you live. In addition to the 3 dimensions of space and the one of time, there is the dimension of openness in my presence. This dimension transcends the others, giving you glimpses of heaven while you still reside on earth. This was part of my original design for mankind. Adam and Eve used to walk with me in the garden before their expulsion from Eden. I want you to walk with me in the garden of your heart, where I have taken up permanent residence. So thank you, Lord. Yes, that quietness that we have, everybody that's viewing, we thank you, Lord, that you bring peace to their hearts and that you are leading and guiding us each and every moment of our day. We ask this in your precious name. Amen. So thank you for letting me read that. I'm going to wash my hands coming around the camera, so you may see the back of my head, but we have a different shot today that we're doing to cook. So it's going to be more focused around the stove. So instead of doing some of the prep work over here on the other counter, we're actually going to go to the stove and prepare today's Texas hash. So I have a large skillet here because I'm going to be doubling my recipe. So when you view the recipe and the video online, the recipe is going to be for 1 batch. But I have just, like I said, going to make it extra. It'll be great for lunches, having a little bit of that left over. So I'm going to heat this up. I've got my oven preheated to 350 degrees. So what I have before me, like I said, this is Texas hash. Very similar to a Spanish rice, but you do it and you bake it. And it was growing up, it was just a family favorite. So I'm going to, in order to saute the onions, I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil. Just put a little in the bottom, because when I add the ground beef, that's going to produce a lot of fat. But in order to get the onions sauteing and started, I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, put some olive oil in. So because I've doubled it, I have 2 onions, large onions chopped. I'm going to add that in. Now and I think I mentioned when I was doing the Spanish rice, I couldn't remember where Mom got the recipe from, but the Texas hash recipe definitely came from Aunt Judy. So thank you, Aunt Judy. We have loved this recipe. It's been really, really good, and it's great cooked. I mean, when you plate it up, to have country green beans and applesauce and a slice of butter bread. But tonight we're going to be eating, I don't know, we're going to either have corn or maybe some frozen broccoli. I don't know. I'm going to go into the freezer and see what I have. We just had green beans the other evening, so trying to change things up a little bit. We turn that up a little bit higher to get it going. So also what I'm going to add to the onions is, and again, I just want to reiterate everything that I mentioned, is it's a double batch. So I have 2 large bell peppers that I chopped. I went to the freezer, and those that have watched the video before know that I have, during the fall, I get a bunch of peppers. And we spend about an hour cleaning them and then chopping them. And we put them out on a jelly roll pan and let them do like a quick freeze. And then we'll bag them up and put them in the freezer. And they're just great. It saves you from having to cut. Makes it a little bit quicker until they're used up. I have a couple bags left, so it'll get me to the fall. So So while the onions have started to cook a little bit, I'm going to add the bell pepper. And also, so I have 2 pounds of ground beef. Everybody knows that I get our beef from Jim Rhodes in Murraytown. So I think we're about ready for another time to get that. So real excited, but we still have some things in the freezer that we're using up before we get another. We get a half and then split that with Kathryn and Chris. So it's just really nice to have that fresh ground beef. You know, the steaks and all. So you've heard me talk about Jim Rhodes, and they have Black Angus that they sell. Okay, so we really do not want to brown the onions. It's more of just getting them started and kind of sauteing a little bit. With the green peppers being frozen, you're going to have a little bit extra moisture, and with that, but that's okay, when we drain all of that off, that'll come off along with the grease. Okay, so I'm going to put the ground beef in. This is going to really fill up my pot here, my skillet. So you want to, when you're doing this, if you want to double it, like I have done, you may want to make sure you have a large, deep skillet to be cooking that in. So while that cooks a little bit, I'm going to tell you about something that Kathryn, anytime that I'm draining grease, it is always a mess. Whether you use a pan to put your drippings in, do not want to put any of that hot grease down the sink, or you're going to have problems down the way. But Kathryn was the one that came up with this. So she taught me that I line a dish, and you may be well aware of that, but for me, I was not until Kathryn told me. So you line a dish that's going to be large enough to hold your grease with foil. You put your colander or strainer or whatever you want to use. So when you put your hamburger and that grease comes out, it'll be in there. You let that cool and kind of start to congeal, and then you just pop that out, put it in the trash can, and your cleanup is rather easy. So that little helpful hint was from Kathryn. So it's great, and it saves Ron when he's doing those dishes. Right, Ron?
Yes.
So while the ground beef and the onions and the peppers are cooking, I'll tell you a little bit more of what I'm going to be putting in here very shortly. As soon as we get this nice and brown. So I have, for mine, it's going to be a cup of rice, but for the single batch it will be a half a cup of uncooked rice. So that's kind of nice that you don't have to use another pan to cook your rice before you put this in. So it can be, so those that are working, if you want to make this up like the night before and just not bake it, that way it's ready to go. You pop it out of the refrigerator. To me, I would stick it in a cold oven because you're going to let that gradually heat up your pan, as well as instead of putting your cold pan casserole dish into a hot oven. That's room for disaster. So, but you could even do that prepared if you wanted to go ahead and cook it the night before. It's a great dish to heat up. Reheat. Tonight, I think it's going to be Ron and I, so we've got going to have a lot of leftovers. But it's great, you know, to change it up and just give yourself a different vegetable if you want to use it on a couple nights. I was at the market today and I almost picked up some fresh asparagus, but it's like, well, Ron, he likes the asparagus, but if it's a large bunch, it's a lot to have, so. So also that I have that we're going to put it in is 2 teaspoons of salt per single turn of the dish. So I have the 4. Seems like a lot of salt, but you do have, with the rice and the ground beef, it's going to kind of absorb that salt. Then, this is kind of the key. It's kind of spicy. It's 2 teaspoons of chili powder per single dish. So this is 4 I have here. And then I have 1 teaspoon of the coarse ground black pepper. You can just use the regular black pepper that you have in your pantry. And then 2 16-ounce cans of tomatoes. Most of your single cans come like 14-ounce, but I went for the large tomatoes and then a smaller one. So I had a large can and then a smaller one. Maybe a little extra tomatoes that I need, but it's all good. It's what I had in the pantry, and so it will absorb with the rice and it'll be delicious. So the ground beef is browning nicely. We're almost going to be ready to drain that grease off. I was reading an article and somebody said they do not, no, I was watching a cooking show, and they said that years ago they never drained the juice off, the grease. And I'm like, oh wow. All I could fathom, that is a lot of extra fat. Now, I enjoy my food, but that's a lot more fat than I would want in my casserole. And then some said, there for a while I was going through a health kick that anytime that I drained the grease off of, if I was browning hamburger or whatever, I would rinse the meat. Well, Aunt Louise saw that one day and she said, Terry, do not rinse that. You're losing out on that extra flavor. So from then on, if Aunt Louise spoke that, I'm going to follow through and not rinse the hamburger. But certainly do what works best for your kitchen, and that is all good. So I'm going to do a little shifting here because I'm going to be, normally I go to my sink to drain. I put my bowl in my sink so that it's not a real big mess, but to keep everything on camera, you're going to see me do this. So wish me luck. Now that is a heavy skillet. So far, so good. Get those wrist muscles all ready and strong. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lift that up. Wonderful. And just drain that grease. And Kathryn's surefire method here to keep everything from being such a mess was a great idea. Getting that last little bit. So I'm going to shift that back over. Put that back in my skillet. So I'm going to show you here how the foil, just having the foil around that pan kept that all kind of contained. And so I'm going to set that to the side, let that cool, and because I do not want to put it in the trash hot like that. So turn this down a little bit. So I am going to add my salt. And I'm going to put in the pepper. I'm going to stir that around. And then I'm going to sprinkle in that chili powder. And the reason I'm doing that this way versus putting my tomatoes, I want to get those spices kind of mixed in. So once I put that additional liquid in, I don't want it to clump and you get a real strong taste of chili powder. Okay, so now I have my whole can of tomatoes that I've kind of broken up a little bit so that they didn't come out and as the whole tomatoes. You can get diced tomatoes already, but I have a tendency to buy the whole tomatoes. I don't know why, but I do. But whatever works for your kitchen, it's all good. So I'll kind of mix that up. Then I'm going to add in my rice. So we're just about done. And I have a large casserole dish, Corningware. And I'm going to be putting it in there. And what you do, you cover that with foil and you're going to bake it for an hour. Now, I would say bake it for about 45 minutes and then take your foil off because I kind of like the crispiness on the top. If you do not want that, keep the foil on the whole hour. But our family kind of likes that crispy coating or crust that comes on this. So just try it out, see what you think, see how your family likes it. And it says to simmer for 10 minutes. And since I would normally do that, but since we're here on video, I do not want to do that and stop and start the video. So I'm going to maybe rush it a little bit, but that's okay. It's all going to be good. But the recipe does call for it to kind of just simmer for 10 minutes. So put your stove down on low and just let it kind of bubble and simmer there for about 10 minutes. But again, this is when you really think about it, it's such a quick recipe, and the bake time is an hour. Let me have my foil ready and I'll switch that over into our pot. Then once that bakes, I'll show you what it looks like as it comes out of the oven. Okay, well I think I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And I'm going to take this over and pour it into my casserole dish. Oh, it has a wonderful smell. That chili powder, the tomatoes. You cannot go wrong with ground beef, rice, and some seasonings. So it's made a very healthy amount. So this is what it looks like in the pan. So I'm going to just cover it with foil so that can steam in there. That rice will cook very nicely. Okay. And then again, my oven's been preheating to 350 degrees. I'm going to stick it in the oven and let that bake an hour. So we'll be back shortly. So we're back. The Texas hash has come out of the oven and it smelled up the house. The kitchen smells so good. I ended up deciding to make some corn. We have some applesauce, and as I was going into the pantry to get corn, I saw the pickled beets that I had canned, and I thought, boy, that would taste good. Ron's not a big fan, but I am. So I normally do not plate Ron's plate up, but I'm going to do it this evening. And So I'm going to give you tell me how much you want, Ron. So I did take that foil off, and it did have that nice crust on top. Some corn?
Yes.
And even though it's Ron and I, we still make it an effort to set the table and sit down at the table to eat, because that's so important. And I'm going to dip my plate up, but I just want to thank you for joining us virtually.
Did you mention my bread?
I did not mention Ron's bread. So Ron has started making bread, and it is delicious. It's a bread that he makes overnight. So I'm going to have him put on a video, but we're not sure how we're going to do it because it does sit overnight. But it has been delicious. This happens to be a wheat and rye combination.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it is delicious. So thank you for coming into our home virtually. Thank you for liking our videos on YouTube, subscribing and sharing. We do appreciate it. Blessings.